February 18, 1944. Deep within the tangled jungle ridges of Eniwatok Atoll, the air hung thick with humidity and rot. Palm leaves dripped slowly after a brief tropical rain, and the ground steamed under boots that sunk into mud layered with decay. Somewhere ahead, hidden beneath earth and roots, Japanese defensive positions lay silent. Then, cutting through the stillness, came a new sound, low, mechanical, and unfamiliar. A short burst, a roaring exhale, fire. For Japanese troops entrenched across the Pacific, the American flamethrower was not merely a weapon, it was a rupture in expectation, a violent contradiction to everything jungle warfare had taught them to endure. To understand the shock that rippled through Japanese ranks, one must first understand the environment in which they had prepared to fight. From Guadalcanal to Saipan, from Peleliu to Iwo Jima, Japanese doctrine emphasized concealment, patience, and the natural defenses of terrain. Caves, bunkers, spider holes, and jungle foliage became extensions of the soldier's body. Darkness and silence were allies. The jungle, dense and alive, was believed to neutralize technological advantage. Japanese commanders expected American infantry to struggle forward under these conditions, slowed by terrain, visibility, and fear. They expected grenades, rifle fire, perhaps artillery. What they did not expect was fire that could bend around roots, crawl into caves, and consume oxygen itself. The flamethrower, our recurring symbol, entered the Pacific War as a solution to a brutal problem. American forces encountered defensive networks that conventional weapons could not easily neutralize. Grenades could be thrown back, bullets could not reach around stone. Artillery often collapsed entrances without killing those inside. Flamethrowers changed that equation entirely. Official U.S. Army records show that by 1943, specialized flamethrower units were increasingly attached to assault platoons. Carried by individual soldiers or mounted on modified tanks, these weapons projected streams of burning fuel up to 40 yards, capable of penetrating bunkers, caves, and thick vegetation. The flame did not need precision, it only needed proximity. For Japanese troops trained to remain unseen and immovable, the psychological impact was immediate and devastating. After-action reports captured by U.S. intelligence describe defenders abandoning fortified positions after the first appearance of flamethrowers, sometimes before the flames were even used. The mere sight of the nozzle, the promise of fire, was enough. The emotional contrast was stark. Japanese soldiers expected the jungle to protect them, to absorb the enemy's power. Instead, they watched the jungle itself become a conduit for destruction. Leaves ignited, roots burned, air turned toxic. The flamethrower erased the boundary between natural shelter and death trap. One Japanese officer later wrote that caves once considered impregnable became ovens. This was not metaphor. U.S. Marines documented temperatures inside sealed bunkers rising rapidly after flame application, rendering survival impossible. The flame consumed oxygen, replacing it with choking smoke and heat. Even those not directly burned were incapacitated within seconds. The recurring symbol, the flame, took on layered meaning. It represented American industrial chemistry, logistics, and moral resolve. Flamethrowers required fuel, pressure systems, spare parts, and trained operators. Each burst of fire carried the weight of factories thousands of miles away, of tankers crossing oceans unchallenged, of supply chains that functioned despite distance and danger. Japanese troops, already strained by shortages, watched this with growing despair. Many Pacific garrisons were running on reduced rations by late 1943. Ammunition was scarce, medical supplies nearly non-existent. Against this backdrop, the flamethrower appeared as an expression of abundance. Fuel burned not sparingly, but decisively. Captured Japanese documents reveal a shift in tone after encounters with flamethrower-equipped units. Earlier writings emphasized endurance and concealment. Later reports warned that remaining in caves invites annihilation. Doctrines struggled to adapt. There was no countermeasure. Jungle terrain, once an advantage, now amplified the weapon's effect. For American troops, the flamethrower was not viewed with triumph. Operators were acutely aware of their vulnerability. Flamethrower carriers were prime targets, often shot on sight. Casualty rates among these soldiers were among the highest in assault units. Yet replacements continued to step forward. The system sustained them. This persistence marked a transformation in Japanese perception. The enemy was no longer seen merely as tactically aggressive, but as inexhaustible. The flame returned again and again, bunker after bunker, island after island. It did not pause for negotiation or fatigue. It advanced with methodical inevitability. By the time of Iwo Jima in 1945, flamethrowers were fully integrated into American assault doctrine. Mounted on Sherman tanks, they projected fire into cave networks that stretched for miles. Japanese defenders reported that the sound of ignition, followed by the rush of flame, signaled the end of resistance in entire sectors. The jungle and volcanic rock could no longer shield them. The symbolism endured. Fire, ancient and elemental, became the expression of modern industrial war. In American hands, it was not chaos but control, applied deliberately, supported by logistics, guided by strategy. It reflected a democracy's grim decision to use overwhelming force to shorten a war that had already consumed millions. In the aftermath, surviving Japanese soldiers spoke less of hatred and more of inevitability. They described a moment when faith in terrain, doctrine, and endurance collapsed under the realization that the enemy could adopt endlessly. The flame had stripped away illusion. And so the story concludes in the quiet left behind after battle, when smoke thinned and the jungle slowly reclaimed the scorched earth. The flamethrower's work was temporary in landscape, but permanent in memory. It revealed a larger truth of the Pacific War, that freedom, backed by collective industry and shared sacrifice, could project power into the most hostile environments on Earth. Fire burned out. Steel rusted. Leaves grew back, but the lesson remained. Against a system built on scarcity and isolation, abundance, terrible and decisive, proved unstoppable.